Well, before we can write all those books, we must first learn how to compose a thesis statement. Now, we just consulted the lengthy handout on thesis statements, and we learned different things about them. And I think that one of the things that really comes across from that handout is that thesis statements are, in many ways, the cornerstones of academic writing. Now, in preparation for writing your own thesis statements, I've prepared this interactive video which highlights 3 distinguishing features of the thesis statement and alerts you to some of the common pitfalls that I've noticed over the years that people make when constructing them. There are 3 distinguishing characteristics of thesis statements: the argument, precision, and specificity. The first thing to keep in mind, and this is of course the first salient characteristic, is that thesis statements contain your argument. This is what makes them so powerful and so interesting. This is your particular take on a topic or an idea, be that a prompt on an essay like we have in this class, or, and this will occur later on in your academic careers, or it might be a topic that you yourself have created on a research topic that interests you. So your thesis statement contains an argument. Sometimes this comes in the standard formula, such as, in this paper, I argue that X, with X being what you think. And sometimes the thesis statement is more subtle than this and doesn't contain that formula. One of the things we learn in undergraduate writing, of course, is that while in high school we might have been taught to shun the use of the first person pronoun, the I and the we, in undergraduate writing we learn that it's actually not only okay, but in many times necessary to use the first person, with the exception being certain types of scientific writing. With this in mind, I'd like us all to consider question 1. Let's go through this for a moment. Selection A. This paper explores the way in which citizens of the antebellum South dealt with issues of Northern relations, states' rights, and slavery. B. This paper explores the various ways in which citizens of the antebellum South dealt with these issues and argues that citizens viewed most pressing concerns of the time through the framework of institutionalized racism. Now, both of them, on first blush, seem compelling, but one of the things we find, of course, about statement A is that it tells us what we are going to be doing. It doesn't contain an argument. Selection B contains an argument. Institutionalized racism is the framework through which the paper is going to be approached. It's an argument, and it is the better selection. Now, moving on, the second salient characteristic of thesis statements is that of precision. Now, we know it's a complex world, and all of the ideas we're asked to discuss in an academic essay are themselves complex. They contain nuance, there are counter-arguments to them, and there are so many things to consider. One of the refreshing things about thesis statements is that they take all of this complexity and they reduce it. This, of course, does not mean that our essays aren't full of complexity and nuance themselves. It just means that a thesis statement needs to contain something precise, and it needs to argue and say something. With this criterion of precision in mind, I'd like us to take a moment to consider the second question. Which is better, A or B? Now, let's look at A. The Obama presidency's main value has been largely symbolic rather than substantive and enduring, right? And let's compare that with selection B. The Obama administration has many pluses and minuses, and evaluating them depends on one's perspective and viewpoints. Once again, both of them seem on the face of themselves quite good, but of course, according to the criterion of precision here, option A says something specific, it contains an argument, and it is precise, right? There is a symbolic value, there's a value, it is symbolic, and it is not enduring. Once again, and this sort of overlaps with the first question, Selection B really describes what we're doing, but it lacks a certain focus and a certain specificity that we need in a good, robust thesis statement. Moving on to the third and final thing, right? In addition to containing an argument and being precise, a third characteristic of thesis statements is specificity. Now, you'll note, of course, there's a lot of overlap among these different criteria, right? Specificity, precision, these are all similar ideas. One of the pitfalls I tend to find in undergraduate writing is that sometimes, in the midst of sorting out all of the complexity we've considered, is that we have a good idea of what we don't want to say, but we forget to make a positive statement about what we do mean, right? And of course, recall the first characteristic of a thesis statement, they must contain an argument. So with this idea of specificity in mind, I'd like us to consider the third and final question. And let's go through them for a moment. A, I argue that race, gender, and socioeconomic status are the factors determining one's ability to achieve the elusive American dream. B, while race, gender, and socioeconomic status are significant factors, I argue that they cannot by themselves determine one's ability to achieve the elusive American dream. This one's tough, right? They contain a lot of similar wording. Now, if we keep in mind what we just said about specificity and precision, we have to see that selection A is the better choice, right? Selection B makes the pitfall of saying all the things that it isn't instead of saying exactly what we mean. It doesn't contain an argument. It lacks specificity and precision. That is, ladies and gentlemen, a rough introduction to thesis statements, and I'm very pleased about the fact that over the next while, you are all going to compose your own thesis statements and use them as the basis for an academic argument and essay, something that Brown undergraduates do every week. It's going to be exciting, it might be challenging, and with that in mind, I'm here for you. You can contact me over Canvas, over email, and over Skype. You can bounce ideas off of me, because I am here for you, and together we're going to create amazing thesis statements as the basis for our essays. Thank you.